Welcome back to the playthrough of Almoravid. This is the quick start scenario, and we're into turn 2 and about halfway done. So it's now Alvar's turn, and what is he going to do? Well, he's going to try to do the siege of Toledo, and he succeeds in the die roll with 4 siege markers on Toledo and a ravage marker. He only needed to get 3 dice under 5, and he succeeded in doing that. The successful siege triggers a whole series of events, and we'll start off by removing the siege markers. And now we'll replace the 3 jihad markers on Toledo with 3 conquest markers. And now we'll move down the Muslim points to 5.5 and raise the Christian victory points to 8. We'll flip the ravage marker from the Christian side to the Muslim side, and that will lower the Christian points to 7.5 and raise the Muslim points to 6. Continuing with our changing from Parias to Reconquista, we also need to change the ravage marker on Toledo into a Muslim ravage marker. That will change the score for the Muslims to 6 and for the 6.5, and for the Christians to 7. The stronghold where Almoravid is gets a jihad marker, and that raises the Muslim score up to 7. And we replace the Parias marker with a conquest marker, and that nets the Christians 2 points. Up to 9. Normally for sieges, a successful siege, there are no spoils of war, but the Christian player plays the Betrayal of Terms card and gets the spoils as if they had sacked the city. They'll give a coin, a loot, and a provender to Alvar and Garcia, and the rest to Alfonso. And now the Christians need to feed their troops, and so each lord will pay 1 provender. Now the Muslims find themselves in a position where they need to make up 2 points, and they only have 3 cards to do it. So, and Abu Bakr can only make 1 move, and he only has a command rating of 2. So the best they can do is actually just do a ravage, and there's no sense of moving, so he'll just do a ravage where he is. Almoravid needs to get to somewhere and get the points, and it's possible if they could do a siege action that they could take a castle for 2 points, maybe a ravage if possible. I'm not sure if that's quite likely though. We'll give it a shot. So it's Abu Bakr's operation. Go ahead and do the ravage, grab a loot, and actually with a loot without dropping something, they won't be able to move anywhere, since they'd be going at the laden speed, so they'll just stay where they are. And the Muslims score half a point. Okay, it's Sancho's activation. You will go ahead and invade. He's going to go over a pass, and I'd like to keep as many activations as I can. So go ahead and drop off a provision, so you can just spend 1 point over the pass. Has to bypass the fortification and go ahead and try to ravage, and successfully ravaged, which gives a point. And since he has another activation, another command point to use, go ahead and convert that into a siege, and he gets a half point, now up to 9.5. The lead is back up to 2. Sancho feeds the troops with 1 provender. That ravage marker puts some pressure on Almoravid, and it will shift his service marker 1 to the left. It's now Almoravid's turn. He still has 2 points to make up. Seemed like if you just tried to ravage, the best you could do was 1.5 points, because heading forward you have to stop at the fortress, and then the next turn you could try to get up to 2 more ravages going. That sounds like the best chance they have is to try to take a fortification. I think they can reach Gormaz, so if they, with luck, they might be able to take that fortification, which would give 2 points, plus if they ravage, that would be 2.5, which would be enough for a victory. Now, Almoravid will go ahead and move to Chile, and then over the pass using the mules for the supplies to Gormaz, and he'll have to do a bypass when he gets there because he wants us to perform some more actions. He'll go ahead and try a raid, but the raid fails due to the border patrols. But Almoravid will have to encamp, starting the siege. It's time to feed the troops. Almoravid has some provender to spend. Almostane has no provender to feed, so they'll have to take a hit and shift to the left on the service track. But they've got some gold in the Taifa box, and go ahead and spend one of that and shift it back so they don't have to disband. Now it's Alfonso's turn. Alfonso has a lot of options. You'd like to, one thing you might want to do is retake some of these fortresses, like the one at Euclid, which would give him a whole point. Except for it turns out that with only 2 turns left, it's kind of hard to do, because it take 1 turn to set up the siege and the other turn to perform the siege, and if you it'd be a long shot to take the siege by sieging, because you'd have to have a die roll of 2 1s. But if he wants to storm, he has another problem, in that the way the rules are set, Alfonso himself would have to try to do the storm. There'd only be 1 round, and even a minor fortress would be very difficult to take, as he'd have to generate 2 hits in 1 round without taking many casualties. So that's not very likely. Alfonso also has the option of trying to do some ravaging in some Muslim countries, and you could probably get 1 or 2 ravages in for 0.5 point or 1 point, which might be satisfied. Or he could be upset that the Muslims are in Leon, and we could go drive them out, which is exactly what he decides to do. Christian force will be going over a pass and wants to keep moving. They only have mules enough for 3 provender, so they'll discard down to 3 provender. Now Alfonso uses the martial ability and move over the passes into Peñafiel. At Peñafiel, we go ahead and use resupply, and he's close enough, and they have enough transport to get 2 supply from this action. Now the Christians advance into the battle, and the Muslims accept. The Christians deploy their forces, followed by the Muslims, which gives us an array of battles, something like this. There are a couple of capability cards that affect it too. Alvar has some archers and crossbowmen. The Muslims have the Andalusian, which will make their horses a little harder to hit. Alfonso looks over the battle, and you can see he has some advantage. The Christians have 1 archery to 0 from the Muslims. They have generated about 10.5 hits for the horses against 7 for the Muslims, but for men of arms they're actually behind with 4.5 hits to the Muslims' 5.5 hits, which is an advantage, but it doesn't seem to be enough advantage. And since Alfonso really just needs to disrupt the siege and not necessarily drive the Muslims off, he decides to concede even for the first round of battle. That will mean that the battle will have to run round and the Christian hits will be halved, but the post-battle effect should be a little more favorable. So we go to the missile phase. The defender has no missiles, so Alvar will target one of Almostain's knights, and the knight survives with a die roll of 2. Okay, for the defender horse phase, it generates 6 hits against Alvar, and Alvar loses the men-at-arms, a militia, loses the serf, loses the 2 sergeants, but the knight survives. Almoravid generates 2 hits against Alfonso, but Alfonso absorbs both hits with the men-at-arms. For the attacker horse phase, Alvar gets to attack Almostaine with 2 hits, half to 1 because of the concede, but Almostaine absorbs it with a men-of-arms. Alfonso and Garcia on the flank combine for 6 hits, rounded down to 3 against Almoravid. The sergeant absorbs 2 hits, and the light infantry absorbs 1 hit. For the defensive infantry round, Almostaine inflicts 4 hits on Alvar, and Alvar's knight stands up to them all and keeps on ticking. Almoravid that's 2 hits for Alfonso. Alfonso at night beats off the one, but succumbs on the second hit. Alvar has run out of infantry, so there'll be no infantry attack on Almostaine. But Alfonso and Garcia combine to give 2 hits on Almoravid, and Almoravid survives. Loses 1 and survives 1. Since the Christians conceded, the battle is over and they have to retreat to where they came from. We can now roll to recover losses, and everybody gets to use their full armor value since the Christians conceded and the Muslims won. So Almoravid gets half of his forces back, Alfonso gets his knight back, and Alvar gets half his forces back. Neither Garcia nor Almoravid lost anyone. Okay, since the Christians retreated, they need to roll to see what effect it has on their service life. And those aren't good rolls. And so there's big shifts for all the lords. Christians are wondering if that's what they really wanted to do. Everybody in the battle has been marked, moved, or fought. And so now it's time when they all have to feed themselves. And the Christian lords have enough provender to do so. The Muslim lords, however, have no food. So they're going to have to shift their service markers to the left one. Alfonso will pay 2 gold to shift himself 2 to the right to keep his army happy and in the field. Garcia pays his troops 1 gold to keep them in the field. Alvar pays 1 gold. It won't be enough to keep him in the field, but in a longer scenario, it makes it so that he could actually come back later. The Muslims spend their last coin from the Typhus box to keep Almostaine on the board. It's now Almoravid's turn, and realizes he's in quite the quandary. maybe the Christians had a plan for attacking, because now Almoravid has no food and no gold, and to do any kinds of siege will take supply, and Almoravid won't be able to feed, will have to go home, and that will hand the Christians some gold, but also 1 point. So even if the Muslims took that fortification, they'd still lose. So the Muslims decide to retreat and get some food. It's Alfonso's last activation, so he takes some supplies and advances. And the Muslims' last activation is a pass, so the Christians win 9.5 to 7.5. Thanks for coming along with my exploration of Almoravid, and I hope you enjoyed it and helped you in your enjoyment of the game.